always felt like there was
Mm,
something wrong with me and like I was broken.
mhm.
And now it put the puzzle pieces together. Like I was trying to keep up in an environment that I was not designed for.
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive in. Start off by telling me your HSP discovery story. This is something I don't know about you. How did you discover that you're highly sensitive?
Ooh, yes. I mean, I always knew I was a sensitive person, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
most of us were like, oh, we always heard we're so sensitive, and that was just a part of me growing up. But it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that I discovered the term highly sensitive person. And really, I discovered it at a time when I was really, really struggling. So basically, I was working in my first corporate job out of college. I had gone to school for retail management and I got this really cool job opportunity in California. I was born and raised in Minnesota. So I moved from Minnesota to Southern California to for this job opportunity. It actually started as an internship with a potential of becoming a job. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I was working in this job and I was really trying to keep up with all of the people around me. It was a very fast-paced environment. I'm a very driven person, high-achieving type. So I wanted to keep up. I wanted to get a raise because I wanted to make California my home and I was barely making any money. So I was very driven. Um, and I was also navigating being in a new state where I had like one friend and I was, didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, also kind of getting over a breakup. I just had a lot of stuff going on. And so I started developing digestive issues they started to get worse and worse. So at first they were, I could subside the pain when I would eat gluten-free or when I would
Mm-hmm.
avoid dairy. But over time, I started to find that I couldn't make the pain go away. And even eating gluten-free was not helping anymore. And I was starting to get really stressed. I'm like, what the heck is even going on? I couldn't figure it out. So I went to all these different gastroenterologists, and
Mm-hmm.
no one was able to give me a clear answer. They're like, oh, you're just stressed. Oh, I don't know. I'm not seeing anything on your test results. Super frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually, I went to see a holistic doctor, a Chinese medicine practitioner. I had never gone that route in my entire life, but I was desperate.
Yeah.
And so, in working with him, I learned that I had something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise known as SIBO. And I had,
SIBO, yeah.
yeah, terrible. And I had leaky gut.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me that, part of it was contributed by diet, but a lot of it was contributed by emotional stress that I was holding on to. And so basically, this kicked off this whole personal development kind of whirlwind for me, where I just started getting interested in why was I so stressed? What was I holding on to? What, did I have trauma? Like, what is, it was all
Right.
brand
What
new
is
to me.
it?
What is this?
Yeah.
Um, and so I started reading self-help books, and my mom actually had come across the book, The Highly Sensitive Person
Mm.
by Dr. Elaine Aron, and she was like, hey, I think you should read this. It seems to describe you.
Mm.
And so I read that in a weekend, and it was the first time in my life I felt truly seen. It was like, oh, finally I have a reason why. I always felt like there was
Mm.
something wrong with me and like I was broken.
Mm-hmm.
And now it put the puzzle pieces together. Like I was trying to keep up in an environment that I was not designed for. I'm
Right.
highly sensitive. It was like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, everything made sense for me. And I just felt like, yeah, the main thing was like, maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
not broken. I always thought I
Oh,
was broken? So that
yeah.
it was huge for me.
That's huge. How many of us have thought that? Like, something's wrong with me. I need to be different. I'm broken. And
Mhm.
then you just have this epiphany of, like, oh, I have a different nervous system. I'm more impacted by things going on around me. And maybe I'm not broken, right? Maybe I'm okay. And just thinking about you, because I remember when I moved to California from the East Coast, it's a big change.
Mhm. Mhm.
Just that alone is a big change. And you don't have your normal support system. Everything is different. So you moving from Minnesota, the climate is different, the landscape, the people, how people engage with each other. And then at the
Mhm.
same time you're doing an internship. Like, I didn't go into my internship as a therapist for a couple years. Like I needed time. So I just can't imagine being thrown into that and the impact on your body
Yeah,
and your nervous
yeah.
system.
Well, and the crazy thing too was like I learned about the internship and then
Mm-hmm.
I had a 3 week turnaround. Like I learned about
Oof.
it and they were like, okay, you have 3 weeks to move cross country to California. And it was one of those things where I was like, ideally I would have more time, but like
Right.
if I miss this opportunity, I'm going to be so sad. You know, so it was that
Yes.
too. It was like there was no transition. It was like find a place to live, find a car, and you're gonna change your whole life. So it's like
In
in
3 weeks.
retrospect, in 3 weeks. It was crazy.
Wow. Yeah, that is so fast. I think it took me months and I had to force myself to buy the ticket and then I decided to take it in stages. So you have this weekend where, and of course, as most of us did, we devour the book, Highly
Hmm.
Sensitive Person,
Hmm.
because it's like finally someone speaking my language.
Hmm.
Here, everything makes sense. For me, it was like, oh, everything in my whole life made sense. So then what happens after you realize I'm highly sensitive and I'm still in this environment that maybe is moving at a pace that isn't supportive? What do you do next? I'm just curious.
So for me, I was really started getting into meditation and
Mm.
finding ways to regulate my system
Mm-hmm.
in this environment because at the time I was still planning to work there. I didn't have a lot of options and I was like,
Right.
okay, I basically was like, how can I make it so that I can deal with this environment in the best possible way without it totally breaking me? And
Right.
it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also had a boss who was extremely overbearing and extremely anxious. And so I would like, he would come to my desk and I would literally get a stomach ache because I could just
Mm.
feel his anxiety and
The vibration of
stress.
it.
Yes. And it was just like
Mm-hmm.
very, like everything was a fire drill.
Mm.
So I did that. Also I had to kind of be aware of like the ways that I was like I had to start having better boundaries with myself, I guess, because
Yeah.
before I knew I was highly sensitive, I would literally wake up at like 4:30 in the morning sometimes to finish a project because I was so obsessed with like impressing my boss
Mm.
and doing a good job. And I was also scared of like messing up. So I would like just not have boundaries and I would stay late because that's what other people were
Mm-hmm.
doing. And so I had to come to terms with the fact that like I'm not designed to work these long, crazy hours. I have to learn to shut it off. And I remember reading this book. I talk about it all the time, The Four Agreements by
Oh
Dr. or
yeah.
by Don Miguel Ruiz. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them, the agreements was always do your best. And for some
Mm.
reason, that really helped me because I used to like burn myself out trying to like, be perfect. But when I realized that like do your best is going to look different each day, and sometimes you have less energy, and like that's
Mm-hmm.
also good enough, that was a game changer. So that's how I was like meditating. I was
Uh-huh.
doing tapping and reading books and
Mm-hmm.
listening to uplifting podcasts on the way to work
Mm.
just to like be in a good state of mind as much as I could.
Yeah, I mean, you were resourcing in every way that you knew how and just filling your tank back up in a very intentional and consistent way, it sounds like.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
which is
I
so
learned a lot
important.
about, yeah, and I learned a lot about regulation in that very dysregulating
Yes,
time, I guess.
exactly. And when you said, like, do your best, at first I was like, ooh, that's a setup for, that's a little bit dangerous for a perfectionist, HSP.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you switch it, it's like, it sounds like what you're saying is do your best with what you have available.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It was like knowing that your best is going to look different each day. And like
Mm-hmm.
recently I heard someone say too, like, oh, if you're at 30%, then like you can give 30% that day. So it's like if you had a bad night's sleep and you're not
Right.
feeling great, you don't have to give 100%. It's just a shift for me.
Exactly. Right. And 30 if 30% is all you have, that's 100% that day.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, it feels so good to say it. And oftentimes, I don't know if you agree with this, but for me, I think a lot of times HSPs are already giving more anyway, so our 70% is often someone else's 100%. Would you say that's
Yes.
true in what you've seen?
Very much, very much. And I
Mm.
see, like, as an outsider, when I'm working with my clients, like coaching them, like, they're so
Mm-hmm.
hard on themselves. And I'm like, you are
Yes.
literally going above and beyond and doing so much more than most people would do, but we are our own worst critics. So, yes.
Exactly. It's true. It's like, look how much you're giving and sacrificing already. And yet we still think we need to do more.
Hmm.
How do you
Hmm.
help your clients unhook from that? Like, is there You talked about regulation a bit and
Hmm.
resourcing. What else is helpful? I'm curious. When you're thinking about clients that are perfectionists.
Yeah, I always am like asking, why do you feel like you need to do more?
Yeah.
Like, what's beneath it? Because
Yeah.
a huge part of the work that I do with HSPs is helping them raise their self-worth and feel more confident
Mm-hmm.
and just feel good enough and valuable as they are. And in my own
Mm-hmm.
experience and with many of the people I work with, we're often overgiving and overdoing and overachieving because we're trying to gain that approval and acceptance from other people, or we're trying to prove to ourselves, like, see, I can keep up. And
Right.
we're burning ourselves out and literally making ourselves sick a lot of times in the
Mm-hmm.
process. So it's like when you know why you are doing it, and if it's coming from an unhealthy place, then it's like, okay, I can recognize that maybe this isn't the most healthy, helpful pattern. Like
Mm-hmm.
for me, I was trying to be perfect at work because I have a brother who's really smart, like super book smart. And I would always
Mm-hmm.
compare myself to him. And I would then, found myself in
Yeah.
an analytical job where it's like, oh, here's my opportunity to prove that I can be good with numbers too.
Mm.
I was making myself sick trying to, essentially it was like pleasing my dad, trying to get attention from
Right.
my parents as an adult. So that
Yes.
recognition, like, was really game changing
Mm-hmm.
for me because I could see in the times where I was like trying to go into the overworking pattern, it's like, ooh, I know I am doing this and it's not
Mm-hmm.
for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's true. We can get stuck in thinking there's only one way to have value, right? Like you
Hmm.
said, like your brother's an analytical job and thinking like, "Oh, this is the way to have value or to be good enough." And yet, seeing the work that you do and the impact that you have on, your community, there's lots of other ways to show up and,
Hmm.
be super valuable in the work that you do.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's crazy because, like, and I naturally could get emotional even talking about this because
Sure.
it's the things that I once thought were the bad parts of me, the, more creative, the emotional,
Mm-hmm.
sensitive parts of me. That's now like everything that I lean into. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
I'm analytical too, and I like that part as well. But like I was trying to fit into a role that wasn't me
Mm-hmm.
before, and I was making myself sick. And then it was like, oh, now that I'm leaning into, my natural way of being, I feel so much better. And I'm fine. It's just like that
Yeah.
being authentic.
Exactly. Yeah, being your true self and valuing what you can bring.
Exactly.
I know you talk a lot about, HSPs. We have this experience where oftentimes we think what others are doing or what others are expecting is the right thing, that, they might know more than we do about our own needs or how we should live our lives. Um, can you say more about your own personal experience about that? You talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious if
Hmm.
there's more there.
Definitely. Yeah. So what I've experienced and what I see in other HSPs is a lot of like lack of self-trust and assuming
Mm-hmm.
other people know better, assuming others have it figured out and they have the answer. And
Mm-hmm.
when I think about that, like, in my experience, it was just like I would always defer to others, like to make decisions, like even where
Yeah.
we're going to eat or, what show we're going to watch, because I was honestly like afraid of making the wrong choice and then somebody
Mm-hmm.
being disappointed or like uncomfortable. So I always would just like let other people choose because I didn't want to deal with that of somebody
Yeah.
else. So it was like I just made myself out to not have any needs
Mm.
because that felt safer for me.
Mm-hmm.
um, and the other piece of it too was I just I didn't trust that I knew what was best. I think,
Yeah.
and when I look back on this, a lot of it was like I felt like I couldn't trust my inner knowing because I had heard so much that I was so sensitive and, oh, you're
Right.
making this a big deal. Why can't you just,
Mm-hmm.
deal with it like so and so? And so I would think, oh, the way that I feel and think is wrong.
Yeah.
So how could I possibly tap into my inner knowing? And how could that be right? There's no way. I just didn't know how to trust it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but learning how to trust your inner voice and listen to it is essential to feeling more
Mm-hmm.
confident. And it's one of our greatest gifts as sensitive people is to lean into our intuition and,
Mm-hmm.
see where that guides us because we do have a strong one, but a lot of times we're so closed off to it.
Yeah. We've had to be, right, for survival.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When, yeah, when someone is saying, you're too sensitive, or don't feel this way, you shouldn't feel this way, or why can't you react like so and so. It literally starts to degrade your trust of yourself, you know, your ability to connect with your instincts, and even just to be inside of yourself. I think at least
Mm-hmm.
for me, I started just to detach.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, I just need to focus outward and disconnect from my emotions or what I think is right, because clearly I'm on the wrong track. At least
Yes.
that's what other people are telling me. So it sounds like you had a similar experience.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just was so unaware of what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even something I thought of because
Mm-hmm.
I was so attached to how everyone else was responding to me that just
Yeah.
felt like the most important thing.
Yeah. It does feel like the most important thing, because what's the consequence? You know, disconnection, or people being angry at us, or getting it wrong, or even just that pressure of, if I decide something and people don't like it, then they're looking back at me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot to
Mm-hmm.
deal with, so it's better just to say nope. I'm just gonna detach. Um,
Exactly.
is that the space that you were in still when you moved to California, or had you already started to shift that?
I was definitely in
Mm-hmm.
that space. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
would say that my move to California was definitely a major catapult in me learning to
Mm-hmm.
trust myself because it was the first time I had ever done something like that, where it was this like
Mm-hmm.
radical move that was like, whoa, like I'm leaving behind my family and friends. Like, that's kind of crazy. I've never done
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. But it was like such a shift for me to just feel that fear and be like, you know what, I'm more afraid of not doing this than I'm afraid of
Mm-hmm.
doing this. So, I came to California, but then I was extreme, like I still remember my first like friendships here and just how awkward and uncomfortable I felt in group settings,
Mm-hmm.
especially not being from here and feeling like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know all the coolest things. I didn't know how to dress. I
Right.
didn't know what people were talking about. I
Mm-hmm.
remember judging myself a lot, feeling like an outsider, just feeling very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I was in that space for, I'd say, the first 2 years of living here. I was really
Oh
just
yeah.
like coming to terms with who am I? How do I live in a place? Like, how do I tell myself I'm okay as I am in a place
Mm-hmm.
where I don't always feel like I fit in? It was very confronting,
Mm.
especially because I felt like at first I felt like, oh, I was escaping all of my insecurities that, I could leave it behind in the past and
Right.
start fresh, but no, they actually follow you and the same
Yes.
issues keep popping up. So, yeah, I was dealing with that a lot.
Yeah, it's the fantasy, right? Like, move to a brand new place, a fresh start. There's all those associations are gone, but
Hmm.
yeah, there nothing shifts inside until we're really ready. And
Hmm.
I'm just thinking about how brave it was for you to make this big leap on your own, to decide, I am going to make a big change. I'm going to move to a completely different area, start this brand new internship, and really stand on my own 2 feet. That must have
Hmm.
been really intense.
It was intense. It was intense and it was invigorating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's funny because I almost like when I think about like why did I do that or how did I do that? I think part of me really was running away from the
Mm-hmm.
discomfort that I had felt because I had
Mm-hmm.
been in such an unhealthy relationship in college and that had
Yeah.
ended and I was so just like distraught and I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
happy with who I was. And I almost felt like this was like dangling in front of me as a way that I could escape it. So it's like, I don't know, and it was almost like this drive to like prove other people wrong. Like the people who doubted me in high school or who kind of made
Mm-hmm.
fun of me. Like it was like, nope, here's my opportunity. So it was like this like
Yeah.
drive inside of me,
Mm-hmm.
where I almost didn't even let myself feel any of the fear because I was like, I have to do this.
Yeah.
It was so interesting.
It is interesting that in an effort to maybe unconsciously move away from some of those bigger feelings, you ended up right in the middle of them.
Yes, yes. And it was like getting the stomach issues. Like that
Yeah.
was something I couldn't ignore. It was just
Yeah.
like, you can't live with it for long because it was like the list of foods I could eat was like diminishing by the day. And so
Right.
it felt like it was so meant to be for me to just like be confronted with that
Mm-hmm.
and be like, okay, you've got to make a change. Like
Yeah.
it like woke me up to it. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that's happens for a lot of sensitive people where we have this
Mm-hmm.
like breaking point where it's like, okay, I have to like
Yep.
learn a new way of living. And we don't know
Mm-hmm.
that we need to do that until it's like in our face sometimes.
For sure. Yeah, because I think we get often get a very, we talk about sensitive people being, fragile or weak, but if you think about how much, okay, let's say someone is feeling or going through something, and we're going through and feeling the same thing, but we're feeling it at 1,000 times of a magnitude and more nuanced,
Hmm.
and yet we don't think of ourselves as strong or resilient. It's incredible to me.
Yeah, no, you're so right. It's like I'm like most people are so afraid of feeling anything. You know,
Right.
there's so much of people just cutting off and disconnecting in the
Mm-hmm.
world. And when you're sensitive, it's hard to do that. Like obviously you can, but it's
Right.
not healthy.
Yeah.
Um, so you're 100% right. We are feeling it at a greater magnitude. It's
Mm-hmm.
more intense for us, and a lot of us are trying to, you know, express those emotions and share, and that's vulnerable, and that,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
does take strength and resilience for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us have this kind of breaking point moment that you talked about where like we're seeking what's going on with me. For some people it's a digestive issue, for others, getting migraines
Mhm.
relentlessly, or for me I get a lot of skin issues that pop up and I'm like, okay, it's time to pay attention.
Mhm.
For others it could be emotional. There's so many different ways our body will scream at us and
Yeah.
say, pay attention to me, you need something different.
Mhm.
So there's these more obvious signs that you get to a point where you just can't ignore. And I think
Mhm.
we're kind of used to living in discomfort as sensitive people, and so you
Mhm.
kind of get you in some ways you can maybe ignore for longer than others might be able to. I'm
Mhm.
not sure.
Mhm.
But what are some of the subtler signs? You talked about valuing yourself and making your own decisions and taking taking care of yourself, letting yourself take up space, right? Letting
Mhm.
yourself set boundaries
Mhm.
because you had to. But what are some of the more sneaky signs of maybe I'm not valuing myself as an HSP
Yeah.
before
You
we
know,
get to that bigger blow up?
totally. You know, something I notice a lot, and I didn't even realize it was an issue until I started working with people, and it kind of just like reminded me, was
Mm-hmm.
noticing I will notice a lot of people will take things very personally and
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, let's say their friend sends them a text and they use a period instead of an exclamation point. A lot of sensitive people will be like, what did I do wrong? Or,
Mm-hmm.
their coworker, like, doesn't seem as friendly in the hallway or something like that. It's like these little moments and
Mm-hmm.
immediately going into what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously as sensitive people, we're really good at picking up other people's energy and we're usually right if we can feel if something is off.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue I see is a lot of times we're immediately assuming that we're in the wrong and we messed up. And that's
Right.
where I see it's like a lot of insecurity and assuming, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, what did I do wrong? And I used to
Yeah. Right.
struggle with that a lot. So that's like one thing. Or, let's say you have something coming up, you're going to go to a work party or you have, a holiday party or something like that where you're going to be around
Mm-hmm.
people. And it's normal, of course, to have like, maybe some nerves about it and kind of like thinking about like, okay, how's it going to go? What am I going to eat? What time am I going to leave? Like the normal,
Mm-hmm.
stressors. But there's times where I'll work with people and they are like distraught, like it is eating them apart and they're just like so anxious about it and feeling
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable. Again, I like what I always tell people is like it's not about being able to go into situations and just being like perfect and like which is not
Right.
possible and being like an outgoing person that you might not be, but it's about just being like sent or being good with who you are in those
Yeah.
situations. And like if you trip over your words like I just did, it's not like you're not like, oh my gosh, I'm,
Right.
such a loser. It's like I'm human. So it's like
Yeah.
that ability, noticing though when you're being really hard on yourself, feeling
Mm-hmm.
really worried. Like I always just like to point back at, okay, how are you like feeling like where are you feeling like your personal value comes from? Because a lot of times we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh, I have to show up perfectly. I have to say it perfectly. I can't have
Mm-hmm.
anyone be mad at me. I have to, be this star employee all the time. Um,
Right.
Another thing too is like I'll see people and have done this myself. Having no work boundaries or having no boundaries in general, but like at work where they're like
Yeah.
working through their lunch break and they're working late
Mm-hmm.
just to make their boss happy.
Yep.
um, that's a sign like it kind of is like what we were saying earlier, like, why do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you need to do that? Like,
Yeah,
why?
right. Exactly. Looking a little deeper, and as you're able to, I think back before I became a therapist, and I was that person that had no work boundaries. I would
Mm-hmm.
stay until 2 a.m. and I would be back at 9 a.m. and I would
Mm-hmm.
just be constantly available, and it was an effort to, well, I think there was two things: effort to be enough,
Mm-hmm.
and also in an effort to do work I wanted to do, but other people maybe weren't as on board with. So I kind of found a way to skirt around it instead of saying, "Hey, I
Mm-hmm.
want to do my work differently. I have these ideas." So I was just trying to being indirect, but
Mm-hmm.
I burnt out in the process. And like we
Totally.
do that, like we're constantly trying to be perfect instead of maybe what if we work on just having a little more tolerance for discomfort,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right? And maybe just slow it down, look at how well you are actually already doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that look how much you're already giving. You don't need to give anymore. You're okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Oh, it's so hard. And I think I'm sure we both, see this in our work with HSPs, like something usually happens early on where all those different messages start to pile up and you think, not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not good
Mm-hmm.
enough. I have to be perfect or just to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's so sad and
It
hard.
is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I have so much empathy and I have,
Yeah.
compassion for my past self, like just the things
Mm-hmm.
that pile on top of you and the stories that it creates. And
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people like it makes sense that you would feel this way. It makes sense that you're
Yeah.
doing these things because you're trying to protect yourself because you've been hurt and you don't want to keep being hurt. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's a protection mechanism.
Mm-hmm. It really is. So it's I think the work is how can you let yourself be a little bit more imperfect or human?
Hmm.
Like you said, I'm
Hmm.
human. It's
Hmm.
okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to do less.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I love what you said. I mean, I say this all the time with like,
Mm-hmm.
feeling that discomfort and like expanding our tolerance for discomfort because I think it's like such an interesting thing for us as sensitive people. We have different needs
Yeah.
and we have such an empathetic, caring heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the hardest thing for us is to express our needs a lot of times because we don't want to upset people and and we
Mm-hmm.
struggle with setting boundaries. So it's like our natural way of being can be in conflict with what we need to do, if that makes sense. So it's like we need to assert ourselves and share our needs and set boundaries, but that's the scariest thing for us to do. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
of
Right.
course, but doing that is going to be uncomfortable, but it's good for us. So it's just I'm always like, which discomfort will we choose, right? It's like
Ooh.
the discomfort of being, resentful, burnt out,
Mm-hmm.
exhausted, or the discomfort of speaking up for yourself and
Yeah.
not knowing how the other person will respond. So it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like a short-term discomfort or a long-term discomfort,
Yes.
which will then, I mean, which is extra sticky. So let's say you do get to a point of burnout, that doesn't go away very easily.
Mm-mm.
Whereas if you have a difficult conversation in the moment, things might actually turn around, right? You might
Yeah.
actually be able to work and live in a way that's more supportive. And I think typically, we are so prepared for those types of conversations because we think about it so thoroughly,
Mm-hmm.
that oftentimes it goes a lot better than we think.
Yes, you're so right. Yeah. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of times we're making it out to be, way scarier. And it's like a lot of times it feels scary too because we haven't had a lot of experience doing that. So it's like this big daunting thing. But
Mm-hmm.
then, I know after you do it and you share your needs, like you feel elated a lot of times, like, oh my gosh, I did it. Like, wow,
Exactly.
you're so proud of yourself. You give yourself, more a little, it's like a little boost of confidence. It's that like
Mm-hmm.
getting that self-trust back when you stand up for yourself and share what you need rather than continuing to like suppress it and, impact
Mm-hmm.
your health.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Because there's so many consequences to not being able to speak up for yourself or just express your needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have more of what you want come into your life. I know you're someone who lives, I would say, a life that a lot of people wouldn't assume is possible as an HSP. You know, you talked
Mhm.
about you were in this internship after you moved to California, and you know you were there trying, you were working so hard trying to like be what others expected of you.
Yeah.
Um, but you kind of tore that all down in a really exciting way. And started to live in more alignment with your emotional, sensitive, intuitive self. And now you're an entrepreneur, you run a business while also being a parent. So,
Mhm.
all these things that a lot of people would assume, even in any one of those, wouldn't be possible for an HSP, right? To do something outside the box, to run a business, to be a parent.
Mhm.
Um, so how can we, you know, we're kind of skirting around like this living life more fully as an HSP, living more in alignment
Mhm.
with our
Mhm.
true selves, our true natures. But how can we do that without getting overwhelmed? I think
Yeah.
because when we put it on paper, it sounds like that could be pretty overwhelming. But yet, I see
Mhm.
you out here living a life that seems really fulfilling. You know, not
Yeah.
perfect, but fulfilling.
Yeah, it does feel really fulfilling. And there's definitely a few like things at play when I think about it. So,
Mm-hmm.
one, of course, the overwhelm piece is real, and I always have to
Yeah.
check myself. And it's so essential, like non-negotiable for me to have practices in my life to reduce overwhelm. It's the
Mm-hmm.
meditating. And to be honest with you, since becoming a mom, I don't meditate every single day, although
Sure.
that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I just like put in like a walking meditation when I'm
Mm-hmm.
washing the dishes or something.
Nice.
But I always have these little practices. I love EFT tapping. I love just
Mm-hmm.
like putting my feet on the ground, like grounding myself, having little things that help.
Mm-hmm.
But even more than that, really, like those tools are very important. But even more than that, it's like that deeper um, relationship with myself and
Mm-hmm.
caring about myself enough, loving myself enough to know when I'm at my limit. Because in the past, when I really didn't value who I was and I had low self-worth, I didn't have good boundaries with myself. So again, it's like I
Mm-hmm.
would overwork. I would, put pressure on myself to be perfect in all of the ways. And that contributed to a lot of overwhelm for me because I was like trying to juggle everything and be perfect at it. But now in this season of my life and just with all I've learned, I
Mm-hmm.
don't expect myself to be able to do it all. And so I know that,
Mm-hmm.
I have moments with as a mom where I do get overwhelmed and I just have to like use that as an opportunity to regulate myself and know that I can do better next time. So it's like I just have realistic expectations with
Mm-hmm.
myself, which helps. But the other thing that's like huge for me is that I think when you're living in alignment, sometimes you can do more, but it doesn't
Mm.
feel like more because it's pouring into your cup. And that's
Ooh,
the
love that.
thing. Yeah, I think that's been the biggest thing for me because I started my business while I was still working full time in the corporate world. Um, and so I was like waking up at like 5 in the morning and I was working on, blogging and Instagram and doing all of the things in the margins that I had. But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't feel tired, even though I was getting less sleep because I was so invigorated and I was
Yep.
doing something that lit me up and made me really happy. And I think a lot of times we're doing so much of what doesn't feel good. It's like taking our energy away and we're not doing enough of what fills us up. So I think when I think about my life now, it's more
Mm-hmm.
full than ever, but I'm also making sure I'm adding in things that are good for me. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm getting out in the sun on nice days.
Yeah.
I'm very cautious, especially about like eating foods that help my blood sugar stay balanced because
Mm.
I'm especially like prone to getting low blood sugar and then getting hangry and anxious.
Oh yeah.
So it's like I have these little things where I know how to nourish myself so you can
Mm-hmm.
like handle more. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
that. And then it's also just I really hold on to this mindset belief of just like, okay, if there's something challenging, I see it as like, how is this expanding me and giving me an opportunity to practice my tools? So I have a lot
Mm-hmm.
of chaotic moments with an almost 2-year-old who's now throwing tantrums, not sleeping
Mm-hmm.
well. But I'm not like, I guess I just try to approach it with like, okay, this is giving me an opportunity to practice self-regulation. Or, when I'm up with her at night, okay, well, I'm doing the most important work by being here for my daughter who needs me and I'm, her most important person. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all of these things, the kind of jumbled thoughts, but I'm just reflecting like how I'm kind of doing it. And those are the main pieces I would say.
Yeah, you said so many important things, and you're absolutely right in how we approach the overwhelm or the chaos, as you called it, right, of life, it
Mhm.
makes a huge difference. So like for me right now, I'm having to move unexpectedly, but I'm thinking, let me look at this as an opportunity,
Mhm.
right, instead of an inconvenience.
Yes.
It's an opportunity to have a reset and to find even better place to live. And like if
Mhm.
you're up with your daughter in the middle of the night, it's like, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to take care of her or be present with her, or give her something that I would want. Or I'm not sure
Mhm.
where your mind's at with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
um, but we can easily just take a moment, and it's not always accessible, but if possible, just, can I see this in a slightly different way? And that's
Yeah.
what we're really talking about with everything. Like, can I look at how I value myself, or what
Mhm.
boundaries are available? I always think, with HSPs, I have a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, oh, if only I could do that. I'm like,
Mhm.
you can.
Mhm. Mhm.
You absolutely can. I think we take a more passive approach to life because we think we've always had to kind of push ourselves to the side, and we
Mhm.
get stuck being on the side or in the
Mhm.
background of our own lives.
Mhm.
And yet,
Yes.
what if we could go to our boss and say, you know what, I can offer you this, this, and this, but I'm going to need to work from home 1 day a week,
Yes.
right?
Oh
Wouldn't
my
they want
gosh.
that?
Yeah, right.
Of course, not everyone's receptive, but if you lead with the values that you bring, same in relationships, same for yourself. Like you said, when we do more of what's meaningful to us, we can actually do more
Mhm.
because it's
Mhm.
energizing, it's regenerative.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, like I just get so passionate about this conversation, especially when you were saying how people say, "Oh, I can't do this," or "I wish I could do this." And like I part of my mission, or I would say my main mission, is like helping highly sensitive people feel confident in themselves so that they can go into the
Yeah.
world and do make a meaningful impact, because the world needs more sensitive, empathetic people that feel
Mm-hmm.
confident. There's enough of the non-sensitive, like
Yeah.
harsh, you know what I mean? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but the reason I think a lot of times we don't feel comfortable speaking up and being ourselves is because we felt shut down. And it's
Yeah.
like, we don't need anyone to give us permission to speak up. We
Mm-hmm.
have to, you know, take that opportunity. But it's hard. So it's like, that's why we're here. Like, we're here to help you. Because your
Right.
voice is needed, and
Mm-hmm.
you shouldn't have to like live a life that feels,
Yeah.
doesn't feel good for you. If you want to do more, like you feel that way for a reason.
Exactly. And sensitive gifts are so needed. I just think of all the different roles that we play in society, of like healers and artists, and all the things that we bring
Mm-hmm.
to the table.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so many great ideas and such good problem solvers, and emotional leaders. It's like, we need you.
Yes.
We
Yes. Yeah.
really need you. And I understand there's certain limitations, but also I think a lot of times we put the limitations on ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We put the limitations on ourselves. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that's where I think the conversation around just like, feeling that discomfort, and knowing that sometimes we feel uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
about something, not because it's the wrong thing, but because it's something new. So it's like that uncomfortable conversation, or applying for that job that you're excited about but you feel nervous. It's like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that discomfort is good, and we have to,
Yeah.
see it as an opportunity, like, okay, how can I hold myself through this and see what happens? And it
Mm-hmm.
could be the best thing on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think it sounds like we both are living examples of that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Right?
Totally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Both of us have taken kind of big risks, moved across the country, and gotten a little uncomfortable for be able to do more meaningful work, and to
Mm-hmm.
allow our sensitive gifts to come through. And it sounds like we both want to inspire others to do the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important. If let's say I'm just thinking about, because it's been a long journey for me. I'm not sure
Mm-hmm.
about for you
Mm-hmm.
to get here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, like, what was your first step in kind of reclaiming your worth as an HSP? What
Yeah.
would you say that first step was that you took?
For me, the first step was really like when I learned about what it meant to be a
Mm,
highly sensitive person, and like educating myself about the trait.
Mm-hmm.
and just starting to learn about how I work as a sensitive person, like
Yeah.
that was a first step, I would say, because it gave me awareness that I didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that you can't unlearn. It's like once you have this information, you can do with it what you will, but it's not
Mm-hmm.
something that you will forget. So I always
Mm-hmm.
think that's like a great first step is like awareness and like and like that also gave me hope that I
Mm.
could feel a different way.
Yeah.
Because when I felt like I was actually part of a group of people that were
Mm-hmm.
like me, and it was the first time I actually felt like, oh, I could actually belong somewhere.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just felt a lot of hope. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember like, and the other piece of it too within that book that was really inspiring for me was just how she talked so much about like the gifts of being highly sensitive and the
Mm-hmm.
intuitive like gifts that we often have. And there was like something that clicked for me then too, where it was like just learning these things, it kind
Mm-hmm.
of made me see the sensitivity in a different light that I'd never seen before. So it's like being
Mm-hmm.
open to things potentially being able to be different rather than
Mm.
staying in my way of thinking sensitivity is bad. Yeah.
Right. It's so empowering to learn more about yourself and your trait
Mm-hmm.
because, it helps you rewrite those messages that sensitivity is weak or, um, that you have to be different.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. Let's say someone is just starting to kind of learn about themselves. They're just starting to kind of crack
Mm-hmm.
that puzzle open. Um, what is possible? I'm curious. You talked about being more in alignment. What does that look like? If you could get a little more specific, like how do I know if I'm in alignment?
Yes. So I think that we can know we're in alignment. Like I'll just share, like sometimes it can be helpful to know when you're not in alignment so
Yeah,
that you
let's
know
talk
what in
about
alignment.
both. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, I love
Because
that.
when I think about, so I would say like before I started blogging, so I started blogging and
Mm-hmm.
talking about being highly sensitive in 2019.
Okay.
Before that, I was just working in the corporate retail world.
Mm-hmm.
I was dating my now husband and I was happy and things were good on paper. But
Mm-hmm.
I always had this like low level of anxiety. I kind of just
Mm-hmm.
felt like something just felt off in me, even though there
Mm-hmm.
was nothing wrong. It just felt like I kind of had to convince myself that what I was doing, like in terms of my
Mm-hmm.
work, I had to convince myself that I like it and it was the role for me. And it's so funny because I
Okay.
had some really good friends who were creatives. They were in like graphic design and marketing design, something like that. Like they did creative roles. And I
Mm-hmm.
would always say to them, oh, I'm not creative. I'm not creative. But the
Mm-hmm.
funny thing is growing up, I was always drawing. I was always like making my own little books and I like designed the cover for my elementary school yearbook. Like I've always been a creative person, but I
Mm-hmm.
suppressed that part of me.
Yeah.
And so when I started, had this little like inkling in my mind, like, oh, you should start writing. You should start writing.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I started doing that, so much of that like anxiety and like discomfort started to
Yeah.
go away. It sounds weird, but it felt like, oh, something clicked into place. And then I felt that surge of energy
Mm-hmm.
that I hadn't felt before, where I felt invigorated and lit up. And I was like, I just want to
Yes.
do this all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was like, I didn't know until I knew. So being in alignment, I mean, it's not, now I'm 5 years in. It's not like I feel, I do feel very lit up almost all the time about what I do. I'm like, I'm gonna say, yeah, I feel really good about it still.
Yeah, it's
Um,
exciting.
that doesn't mean that it's not hard sometimes, or it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I have to do things that I don't love. But
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's just energizing. And
Yeah.
it's just that feeling of like,
Mm-hmm.
also like calm and grounded, energizing and calm and grounded at the same
It's
time.
both, right? Because you're saying like when you weren't in alignment, there was this buzz, this background noise that was. I'm just putting some words
Mm-hmm.
into your mouth,
Mm-hmm.
but this anxiety that it's like something is not right.
Yes.
Right? I'm curious, how did that, if you have a sense, how that anxiety presented itself? Because, there's so many different flavors of anxiety, but it sounds like this was more about I'm disconnected from a part of myself or what I'm supposed to be doing. How did you notice the anxiety?
Yeah. It felt like, for me, I felt like I was almost always like seeking something to make that feeling go away, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
started to notice that I would feel better if I listened to more podcasts that were like
Mm-hmm.
self-help, and I felt better if I was reading a book. So it was like I was kind of, it was just like I was reaching for something. It almost felt like I was hungry and I was trying to like nourish myself. So
Yes.
I would find
Mm-hmm.
these different things that kind of soothed it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but otherwise it just felt kind of like I don't know if you can hear my daughter laughing in the background. She's like laughing so hard.
So cute.
um, she's funny. Um, yeah, so for me, it was just like, yeah, kind of just felt like, I don't know, it's so hard to describe. It just felt like something was like off and kind of missing. And
Yeah.
I
Like a
felt like
yearning.
a yearning, a yearning. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't get enough, but it didn't fill
Mm-hmm.
the void because I needed to be creating things like this.
Right. Not just consuming create other people's creativity.
Yes, because I also would
Yeah.
notice myself feeling kind of jealous sometimes and
Mm-hmm.
being like, "Oh, well, I could do that too." But then I would, the my I would have a thought like, "But who am I to do that? What do I know?"
Right.
kind of thing. But it was
Mm-hmm.
like that was there, and eventually I couldn't quiet that voice. It was like, "Okay, fine, I'll just try and see what happens."
That's such a it's such an important thing though that like usually there is some inner voice or some inner knowing that's calling out to us.
Hmm.
So for folks that are on this journey, like just notice where your attention wants to go.
Yes.
What
Yes.
podcasts are you listening to? What books are you reading? Who do you feel jealous of or who do you feel drawn to?
Hmm.
Right? That's the sign of
These are
maybe
all,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Yeah.
I was just gonna say they're like your intuition speaks to you and it gives you these little like nuggets, these little clues, and it is often in the form of like curiosity and things you're just like
Mhm.
Google searching and what you're
Right.
listening to and reading.
Yeah, the answers are there. So it's like, listening to, okay, is your body telling you that something is off through
Hmm.
digestive issues, headaches, your emotions feel out of balance? Something is saying, oh, I need a change. And then be curious. Where are you drawn to? Learn more about yourself as a sensitive person. Start to practice listening to that inner voice, even if you don't do anything with it at first. Maybe
Right.
just listen. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, in those spare moments, can you create a little bit of space to do something you love? And then maybe over time that gets to grow.
Yes. Yes,
Sounds like
exactly.
that was your process.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was just like, okay, I'm getting curious about this. I'm gonna finally listen to this nudge, see what happens. And there was no
Mm-hmm.
expectations on it. It was always just meant to be a
Mm-hmm.
fun little hobby.
Right.
And it went from there. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, and it was brought on by experiencing so much pain and then
Mm-hmm.
being inspired by what I had learned as I navigated the pain that, led me to want to write about it. And a
Yeah.
lot of times I think that's where we're finding our greatest purpose is like, ooh, we went through something hard and we
Mm-hmm.
learn from it and then we're inspired to, to do something better for others as a result.
Exactly. There's this quote that I really love by Sean Korn. She's a yoga teacher that says,
Mm,
"Find your wound, find your purpose."
yes.
And I just love that. It feels so accurate for me.
Eh, it is. That's so good. And
Yeah.
it's like, because I think a lot of or I know a lot of highly sensitive people will feel like, oh, it's so hard to be me. Life is hard. I've dealt with all of
Mm-hmm.
these challenges, but which is, valid and true. But
Mm-hmm.
like when you have that perspective of like, okay, find your wound, find your purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it gives so much more meaning to it. It's not
Yeah.
all just to make your life worse. It's like, no, maybe what if there's actually something for you here? And that's
Yeah,
always what I
exactly.
found, It's like the hardest things, there's always something that comes from it
Mm-hmm.
that I'm like, wow, thank goodness I learned that even though it was really
Yes.
hard to go through.
Absolutely. It's the fuel that can drive us to today or drive us toward our purpose or the next stage of our lives. And, not believing that sensitivity is a weakness. Like, you actually have a lot of resiliency, more so
Hmm.
than you ever realize. And then we can
Hmm.
use that to move
Yes.
forward. Yeah. And then
Yes.
know that you're not stuck in the overwhelm, in the burnout, in the stress. That's not the only story as a sensitive
Exactly.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Choosing, it's like, okay, we can feel that and we can choose
Yeah.
how we want to move forward with it.
Exactly. And let it be imperfect. Let
Yes.
how you take care of yourself be imperfect. Still enough. and let your
Hmm.
journey be imperfect. You will, allow yourself time to get there and have those ebbs and flows, and allow yourself to have those messy conversations and yeah, figure it out along the way. It's okay.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree
Yeah.
more.
So I'm curious if there's one message that you could share with HSPs who are, struggling with really valuing themselves. What would that be?
Hmm. That you don't have to change who you are in order to be a good enough, worthy, valuable person. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
you are already as a sensitive, empathetic, emotional person is perfect. I used to think that I had to be somebody who just like didn't care and was like out super outgoing and just always knew the right things to say. And actually, like what made me feel more confident, and I know, has others view me in that way as well, is that I just embrace who I am and I'm like, yep,
Mm-hmm.
I'm quirky sometimes. I'm more introverted and that's okay. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just want to offer that. Like you don't have to change who you are. The way you are
That's
is
right.
perfect. It's just you seeing the value in the way that
Mm-hmm.
you are right now.
That's it. You're perfect just as you are. Don't need to
Yes.
change anything else. That was such a good message.
Thanks.
Well, Alyssa, thank you so much for this conversation. I really valued hearing more about your story and getting to connect more with you, and I appreciate you sharing with all the listeners. I'm wondering, I know you have an empath archetype quiz. I'll include that in the show notes for folks to check that out. How else
Yeah.
can people keep in touch with you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Life by Alyssa. So you'll find lots of content there. I also have a podcast. It's just mostly solo episodes of
Mm-hmm.
me. But that's all like linked in my Instagram bio. So you'll find
Perfect.
lots of things there.